all the naysayers. It was like, whatever, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it's, it was that stubborn determination is really kind of in my mind, the key ingredient to being a successful artist.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 121 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the owner of Cascadia Stoneware. Please welcome Jeff McDougall. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Sorry, I was just going to jump into the Christmas spirit there. Hey guys, it's Brandon again with the Camano Voice. Thanks for coming back for another episode. This episode is going to be releasing on the 14th of this month. So happy 14th day. But this is the last episode at least last interview episode. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to try and sneak in a special Christmas episode of just kind of, I don't know, whatever random thoughts come into my head. But this is my last interview of the year, so I wanted to make sure I took this chance to say Merry Christmas to you guys. Super happy with another year of podcasting. Again, really enjoy doing this, and so like I say in a lot of different episodes and stuff, share with your friends, try and spread it, because I really do want to keep growing this thing. I enjoy doing it and hearing from you guys as well. So you can always send me things at voice@camanocommons.com. Love to hear from you guys. But yeah, have a Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you before then. And again, I've got a lot of interviews planned for the coming year, so don't worry, we're not going anywhere. Just taking a small break as we get through Christmas season, have a family vacation planned in there, and then getting my feet under me in the beginning of the year. So lots going on. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. So about this episode, I've actually been wanting to do this one for quite a while. Cascadia Stoneware has been a staple within the and Camano Commons Marketplace for quite a while. They do excellent work with their stoneware. Their mugs are the things that stand out to me because they are, first of all, they're amazing size. So when you want a big cup of coffee or a big cup of tea, there's just nothing that compares to it. They're just so nice. They're solid, and but his plates and his bowls and all the different things that they make are just incredible. And so, and then also he works with his wife. So him and his wife met in college. They've been married for many years now, and they work together on the business. And so we get to hear about their story, how they got to know each other, and how they kind of made it through 2020 and what that looked like for them. And so, so we're going to get into all of that and more. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jeff McDougall. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the owner of Cascadia Stoneware and Pottery. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff McDougall.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Jeff.
Well, I was born and raised in the Skagit Valley. Grew up in the flats between Mount Vernon and LaConner. My folks still live there. Went to Mount Vernon High School, class of 94. Went to Western Washington University up in Bellingham, and I currently reside in Eastern Whatcom County. I actually got my degree in art with the emphasis in ceramics. So actually studied pottery in school. And yeah, I guess that's the super quick version. Met Natalie while attending Western.
Okay.
We got married in 99, so we've been together 22 years now.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Very cool. So what was it like for you growing up in the Skagit Valley then? Because that's obviously gone through a lot of changes over the last 20 plus years.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved living out in the country and riding our bikes around and going to the river and stuff. And I was really like going up into the mountains and hiking and camping, things I still love doing now. And yeah, there's definitely been a lot of development and building, and I think, my only concern would be, the loss of farmland, but otherwise I think it's created a pretty vibrant local community. I feel like a lot of folks in the area, are really locally minded and supporting businesses. Like I see more full buildings, in downtown Mount Vernon than when I was a kid, which I think is great. So it's, I don't think that growth has necessarily been a bad thing. And small farmers are doing well at the markets, and so I think there's been some good things to the changes. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that stands out. So I grew up on Camano Island, but now my wife and I live in Skagit County. We live in Mount Vernon, and my wife grew up coming in and out of Skagit. She lived outside of Cedro-Woolley. But a lot of her people she knew, friends and stuff, were in Mount Vernon or that's in the Skagit area. So they're, like you said, I think they're so locally minded. They really want to see Skagit Valley succeed and grow and be successful, more so than just grow for the sake of growth or, to get things upgraded or whatever. It's always locally focused.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of that original character in the valley still, and up in Bellingham, it's not all just the same box stores. I mean, there are, the big names, but there's a lot of independent businesses. And I know, especially in Whatcom County, there's a really high ratio of independent business owners. I think it's one of the highest in the nation. And I see a lot of that same trend in the Skagit Valley and just throughout the Northwest in general. A lot of young entrepreneurs, people willing to take a risk, because they want to live here, and so they don't want to relocate somewhere else to make their dreams happen. They want to be in the Northwest. So
yeah, well, and I was even thinking there's businesses that are maybe the larger businesses, but a lot of those are cooperatives. So even there's Skagit Valley Co-op, which is one, but I was even thinking of REI, as far as hardware or mountaineering stuff. It's a co-op, so it's all for the general community that's around here. It's not just to grow business and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and even Costco, the Northwest business, they've always been notorious for paying their employees well. I think it's part of that mentality is supporting each other and helping each other out. So it's not a co-op per se, but it's always been a little more employee oriented than a lot of just the big boxes.
Yeah. Nice. So you grew up, so did you grow up were you homeschooled or public school?
Oh, no, I went to, my parents are actually both teachers. My dad taught at Mount Vernon High School. So I went to Washington Elementary on the west side of Mount Vernon, LaVenture Middle School, Mount Vernon High School. Okay. And yeah, so I went, definitely all public school. My parents being teachers, they had summers off, and so we did a lot of cool traveling, a lot of car camping, and they were really all about educational things. We'd go to all these museums and do all these great things. They're very focused on education in the school, but also at home, and I think that really helped. My siblings all were top of their class. I was kind of the rebel a little bit, but we were all successful. Education, school, and at home. We grew up fond memories of sitting on my dad's lap while he'd read to us when we were little kids, and we all love reading. Reading's one of my favorite hobbies. So I think it kind of takes both to really be successful. I think not just public education, but education at home too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you brought up your parents again. I've got to say, one of the things that when we were probably 6 years ago now, we were going out trying to find a Christmas tree. And so we were driving around trying to find a Christmas tree U-cut place. And we saw some signs, and so we followed them out there. And we jump out of the car, and we're looking at along the house, there was a table set up with some pottery. And I was like, that looks just like the stuff that we have at the marketplace.
Yeah, that's my folks' place. they started selling Christmas trees when I was a little kid. That's kind of my first interaction with, working with customers, doing sort of a retail situation. And they still sell trees it was a nice little side income, little hobby that, helped pay all those college tuitions for all of us kids. And actually, when my mom went back to get her master's degree, it pretty much paid for all that too. So,
wow.
It's a little 1.5 acre tree patch. And my dad loves just, getting outside and, planting the trees and trimming them and digging stumps. It's a good excuse to get out and, and be, outside and get some work done. So,
yeah. No, we still love going there.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then during your school years and stuff, what were you more inclined to the arts and stuff growing up and stuff as well?
Yeah. We always did a lot of craft projects. My mom was really into that. I've got a pretty artistic family, lots of music, musicians and artists in my family. My aunt's like a award-winning quilt maker, and my parents were both really into singing. And so we were just really brought up with an appreciation for the arts. In high school, I actually was more into choir and debate and things as extracurricular activities, was in plays and whatnot. It wasn't until college that I actually started taking art classes and started taking that really seriously. And it's kind of always on the radar, but I thought I was going to be a history teacher, kind of following my parents' footsteps in the teaching profession.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So when you got to college then, what was it that kind of started leading you towards that direction?
I just found that I was spending all my free time kind of doodling, and, my notes for a class would be all these little pictures I was drawing on the side, and just found myself getting more into I was into printmaking, like block printing and stuff, and just getting really drawn into the art world. And really I did a study abroad in Athens, Greece, and just being immersed in all, going to these museums and seeing these 2,000-year-old vases and all this amazing sculpture and all these things that I really kind of clicked. I was like, man, I want to be a part of this aspect of human culture. I want to have my hands in it. I want to make, things. And it was because I was kind of still on the fence, like teacher or artist. And I was like, I'm going to, I want to try to, see if I can make something work with this. And ironically, I hadn't even taken a pottery class yet at that point. I was all printmaking. It wasn't until I came back in my first quarter back at Western that I took my first ceramics class. And it was actually by default, it was the one art class I could get into that wasn't full yet.
Okay.
And so I took it in that first quarter. I was just like some little light bulb went off. I was like, wow, there's something here. And I spent less and less time in printmaking and more time in the ceramic studio. And a year later, I got an apprenticeship and was working in a pottery shop. Okay.
Nice. So during your trip to Greece then, was there anything that really stood out to you? Like, is there like a moment you had there or just any aspect there?
I don't feel like it was one specific moment, but on Sundays you could go to any of the museums for free. And so I would just spend my Sundays going up to like the Acropolis or going to these museums, and it was just being so immersed in that and just being kind of blown away by the quality of work being done thousands of years ago, and how that was, what had held on through history, and what was so important was these works of art. And it just was kind of blown away by how my interest had always been in history, and that was part of why I went there, and how art was kind of like this marker of, showing historical evolution. And then I got really into the Oriental aspect of pottery, and, it goes back thousands and thousands of years. Just, it's been, as ceramics preserves, wood and fiber and all these other things, they, disappear through time, they rot away, whereas the pottery survived. And so you have this amazing chronology of history based on ceramics, and you can trace trade routes by where it went. And it just seemed to kind of be this, fascinating, I was just fascinated by it. It's like, wow, We did go to a pottery shop while we were there. It was like a field trip and watch these guys making stuff. And again, I still hadn't taken pottery, but I was fascinated by it because it was such an important part of, decoding the history of these ancient cultures.
Yeah. Very cool. So as you were kind of going through school and everything, and you started down the pottery journey, was it as you were doing that, were you still under the, like, I guess, did you think that you could make a living and everything based off of pottery, or did you think it was going to end up being kind of more of a side hobby?
Yeah, I was really torn about that for quite a while. There's definitely, a lot of folks are like, oh, you should get the teaching certificate as a fallback, and it's really hard, and yeah, they're right. It's really hard. So it was, but I was young and idealistic, and I actually, I started my first business before I graduated from college. I apprenticed and I started a little business in my parents' barn, and I was working as a potter, finishing my degree in ceramics. So it was kind of like I was so determined to make it work. I wasn't really listening to the voices of older voices of reason saying, well, there's no money in it, and it'll all the naysayers. I was like, whatever, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it's, it was that stubborn determination is really kind of in my mind, the key ingredient to being a successful artist is you can't listen to the people saying you can't do it. And
right.
You just have to plow ahead and find a way. And because you will find people that say, oh, of course you can. It's not going to be easy, but you can make it work. But you're going to have to be determined and focused and, just unrelenting in your desire to make it work.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, like, I've had this conversation with some other artists as well, and it is difficult because it's these people that are loved ones or friends that are trying to, look out for you and give you your best advice. But in order to, like you said, to be successful and to actually push through that, you have to say, no, I understand your concern, but I'm going to make this work.
Yeah. And
are you there?
So my computer just blinked out there for a second. Yeah. And my expectations were never super high as far as like needing to make a lot of money. I think that's also the other key ingredient is I don't need the fancy new car, big fancy vacations. I love just doing, growing a garden and going hiking in the hills and things that, don't really cost any money. And so it never I never had these dreams of like driving a BMW and going to, Mexico every spring break and stuff. And so it was kind of, my ability to live small kind of helped facilitate this.
Yeah.
That we were able to, save money, on a fairly modest income and buy a home and all these things is because, we weren't doing fancy, living it up and buying the expensive clothes and stuff. It just wasn't my personality. So I think, if somebody wants to do that, great, but you might actually need to get a job that pays more than being an artist. It's partially a lifestyle thing. You have to be willing to accept the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. So in this then, you said you met your wife at college, right?
Yeah.
So as you were kind of going through this, were you both in the same classes?
Yeah, we had some art classes together. We actually technically met. We were both working at the Bagelary, which is a little deli in Bellingham.
Okay.
And so we were working there, and we met. And then I somehow tricked her into helping me set up the show that I was doing up at school. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden we're dating. And we ended up taking a couple classes together. And so, we both definitely had the interest in art. And she actually did not start into the pottery right away with me. That came a little bit later. She worked some other jobs out of college while I worked in pottery. So
okay, what was her degree and what kind of was her trajectory?
She ended up getting a general studies degree. She bumped around between like psychology, and art, and kind of couldn't decide, and finally had enough credits that they were like, well, you can just graduate. So she did. She had also thought about being a teacher. Her mom was a teacher. And so she ended up working as an optician out of school, just kind of got, a decent job. And then it wasn't until the Cascadia business started that she came into the pottery thing with me, and was able to get, kind of more back into the artistic roots that she had been interested in.
Mm-hmm. So you said you had started a pottery business during college. What happened when you were done with college? Did you just pour more time into that?
Yeah. I was working out of my parents' barn. I had my little McDougall Mudworks pottery business, and I did a lot of wholesale for Mudray Pottery in Bellingham, which is where I apprenticed, and it was with them that we actually created Cascadia.
Okay.
That was my own business I did from like 1999. I started it through 2000. I think I really kind of officially stopped doing that in 2003, and then I worked at Mudray in their studio as their house potter for the next 3 years. And then 2006, into 2006, we started Cascadia.
Okay. And so was that, were they like partners in it, or you were stepping out?
They were the owners of it, actually. So Frank had been making pottery since the 60s. His big dream was to do this wholesale business. Our timing couldn't have been worse. We started pretty much in 2007 is when we really did the big push to make this happen. And, the recession officially started in 2008, but for artists, it started in 2007.
Yeah.
And it just, we put all this money and effort into building this up, and it was like right after the holidays of 2007, it was like 60% of the business that we had spent all that time and money getting closed. I mean, it was like somebody flipped a switch, and there's no bailouts for that recession, and it was a total disaster. They lost the Mudray. We took over Cascadia in the day, so it was a mess. We had employees, everybody had to be let go. It was pretty much as bad a timing as you could imagine. And it's. We didn't really know what we were doing. I try to, blame a lot of it on the recession, but we were also new to the wholesale thing, and there's a lot to learn versus just doing retail as service. And so, we had a lease that was too high, and we had probably overhired to begin with, and we made a lot of rookie mistakes that were then exacerbated by the economy completely cratering. And so it just was a perfect storm of it was a mess.
Yeah. So what was that like for you, though? Because this is like you'd finally kind of gotten to this point where you guys were really investing and building a new business. What was that like for you during that time?
It was a personal crisis. Yeah, I mean, it was really rough. It was probably the worst phase of my life, trying to hold on to the dream. And we refinanced our home and put all of our savings into building a shop so we could move the business to our house, so we weren't paying a lease on top of everything else. And we had to kind of rebuild from scratch. Rework the whole business plan from one that was focused on wholesale to a mix of wholesale and retail. It was hard. We worked all the time. It was just. We kind of built it back up, and then we found that we didn't really like how much we were having to work. By having employees and doing so much wholesale was just this never-ending headache of too much work to do. There's always too much going on, and so basically after struggling trying to do sort of half the old business plan and half the new one, we finally decided to pretty much focus on retail and just keep a couple of our best local wholesale accounts, Camano, and then actually one down the Oregon coast that had been with us from the beginning, and focus on the local scene and get retail prices. And then finally, I would say 2019 was about the year that everything was clicking. It was just the two of us, and So we were coming into 2020 like, yeah, we got this dialed in. We finally, we got it made now. So, and then, we all know how that went. Disaster phase 2. Fortunately, in 2020, we were able to get government assistance. It wasn't like, oh, too bad.
Yeah.
So we got the payroll protection plan. We got some government loan money, which finally got all forgiven.
All right.
And so that kind of tide us over. We took a little time off in the summer for the first time in 20 years, which was awesome.
Nice.
And then honestly, like the local folks, they exceeded my expectations in their support. Old friends, family members, just old customers were really pitched in and helped out. Like I post on Facebook, and people I didn't even realize were on there were suddenly ordering from me. And it went from like, oh my gosh, this is a crisis, to like, wow, I can't believe how awesome people are.
Yeah.
And so, and this year we basically are back on track with where we were in 2019.
Nice.
So it's, we had our first show at Anacortes in August was like this record show. It was incredible. Like, it had been our record show in 2019 and we were up 80%. It was like our shelves at home were like empty. It was ridiculous. We never dreamed we would sell quite so well. And it wasn't that it was crowded and tons of people there. It's just everybody was being supportive.
Yeah.
And so we heard talking to the other artists, we've become, it's like our cohort, all these other artists, people we know. And everybody kind of had the same story. Oh my gosh, this is a crisis. Well, we made it through. We got some, whether they did unemployment or got the PPP or whatever that, made it through. And then everybody's like, I can't believe how good we're doing this year.
Yeah.
So I really think a big part of that is kind of this whole buy local concept is always kind of it was back there as a little bit of background noise. And all of a sudden it was like, this is really important.
Yeah.
We don't want to see these folks go out. And that's what I keep hearing from other small business owners is, after like 2020 changed things, and it changed the mentality of people as well of like, we want these businesses to survive, so we're going to support them, which is really great. Yeah.
No, I think that's for sure. And I think this holiday season is continuing to compound on that because, kind of the things that in places where people normally go to get Christmas gifts or whether you order online or whatever, like everything's such a mess right now that the only thing you can rely on is being able to actually walk into a store and walking out with something. And the supplies that normally fill those shelves from overseas and stuff are all backed up right now. So we're seeing the people are looking to local things and locally made, and because you can actually get those.
Yeah, and we're having a hard time keeping up, and that's what we're hearing from other artists. Like we got behind. We're just like, oh my gosh, we're barely keeping up with it. It's really amazing how people have been so supportive of it. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah. So when you guys had made that decision to kind of close most of your wholesale and really push towards retail, what were kind of your channels and stuff for like sales channels and marketing and stuff?
The big like summer festivals that are really like our main focus in our business at pre-COVID. Like we'd always done the Tulip Festival in Mount Vernon. That starts in the spring, and then we do some shows in Seattle, like University Street Fair, and I go out to the Squim Lavender Festival is always a good show, and then in Anacortes, and so we do all these kind of shows around the Puget Sound, and they've always been really good. They attract artists from all over the Northwest. They're coming from Idaho and Montana and up from California and Oregon because they just are really good shows. We had some friends where it's kind of like the circuit where this guy that he lives down in California, come up and do all these shows here in the summertime because that's where the good shows are. And then in the wintertime, he does, a circuit down in the Southwest. And so that was kind of our main focus. We have a website, and that was always like a little gravy, on top, a little, just a little extra. And that became our lifeline. And it's continued to be really good. And so that's like, okay, this could actually shift, the shows are so focused in the summer, and that's when it's really nice to get out and go hiking or kayaking or something. We're like, hey, maybe we can cut out a couple shows in the future, because now our online sales and just selling directly from our studio has been really good.
Yeah.
I'll make up, and then maybe instead of doing 2 shows in July and 2 in August, and we can do 1 in each of those months and actually have some more free time to get out and enjoy life. So
yeah. That's great. Yeah, and I think a thing I come back to a lot, and I make this decision. I feel like in our business, you have to decide what you want out of life and what you want out of your business. And you meet a lot of different business owners, and some are, and there's not anything wrong with either way you want to go. If you are in it for the growth and just keeping score and seeing how far you can take something. Or if you want to do more of a balance, then you want to hang out with family and friends and kids. And, I just think there's a lot of, you get to decide how you want to do that.
Yeah. And it's tough because, and you got to be pretty self-motivated and driven to make it happen in the first place. And so to be able to cut back to, enjoy life a little bit more is really hard when you've spent so many years being like, you got to make hay while the sun shines. Like, we've got business, so we got to work, and it's really hard to cut back from that when you've been on this roller coaster for so long of the ups and downs. And so yeah, I mean, right now it's like we're taking 1-day weekends, really trying to crank it out, because we know, well, come January, not so much is going to be going on, and we'll make it up then. But it's it's a hard balance, and I think every small business owner really struggles with that. And how do you balance that work life thing when there's nobody telling you have to show up to work? You're telling yourself. It's really hard to tell yourself not to get that little bit extra done, because there's always something that's not getting done that you're waiting on. And I think in the art world, though, the get bigger thing, it has there's a lot of pitfalls there. I think it's that was kind of the big lesson we learned in the recession of 2008 and 9 is trying to get big. The bigger you are, the harder you fall. And when a recession hits, usually art's the first thing to go. It's like, well, people still need to pay all these other bills, but they don't need to buy a new set of dishes, and so we've learned to be very cautious about, staying small. For us has been the secret to our success as employees. We had a couple employees for a long time, and as they left, we just didn't rehire, and that's how we got smaller. And we made a little more money and we actually had a little more freedom when we didn't have employees anymore. So it's kind of like, for us at least, and that's just our experience, is that, not, being smaller was better. And we've heard that a lot from other artists that have done what we've done. And we know a lot that have kind of that 1 or 2 employees, and that seems to be kind of the sweet spot. 1, 2, or none. You don't want to try to get too big with it, or it just, you're just going to have to be hustling all the time. With just the 2 of us, we can sell everything we make just in the Puget Sound, which is great. We don't have to travel very far to make our business work.
That's great. So, how did you guys kind of come up with the designs for the pottery and the glazes and stuff that you guys produce?
Well, we kind of, my original intent was like, I really like just classic shapes. And when I worked with Frank at Munyai, that was kind of his big theme. Like, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're making basic functional pottery, nice smooth bowls, flat plates, and we're just going to have like, fun kind of flashy glazes that are also at the same time just kind of, timeless. And so we basically we're doing something very similar to what I started with 20 years ago. It's evolved with time. I feel like our decorations got a little bolder, but the concept's still the same. Just classic pleasing shapes that people have been using and used to for thousands of years. There's basic ratios and dimensions that people just kind of like.
Yeah.
So we're not, and I like the uniformity. Some potters like everything to be different. And that's just a style thing. I've always liked having things be more uniform, and we try to, stick with that. It's sort of like just a traditional, pottery method of making sets of things so that people can collect it. And that can maybe get a little mundane in the studio, but it's always worked for us as far as we have a really good repeat customer base where people know that they can, get a plate and it's going to, pretty well match other plates, as good as Handmade is going to get. They come into, they know they can get a pound of coffee and a stein at Camano Island, and their friend that they're giving that as a gift to is going to be stoked because it looks nice. And so it's always just kind of worked. I've always, again, it kind of takes you back to that classical, training and loving the history of it. It's like I just like the basic shapes that have always been used, and there's a simplicity there, and there's a beauty in that simplicity.
Yeah.
And then we just make the glazes look like something kind of natural, like you'd find like a polished stone, or the waves of the ocean on the light blue, or we just want it to look sort of simple but beautiful with a lot of depth, and it just seems to work. People really like, they'll see different things in it. We're not trying to paint figures or create a certain, there's bicycles or dogs or something, but they'll see like stuff in it. They'll see mountains and sunsets, and that's kind of what we're going for, to get other people's imagination going with it. Like,
yeah. No, and I've always, my parents have plenty of your guys' stuff, and we still have kids in the house, so, we've got things that break all the time. So, but I've been eyeing like some of your mugs and stuff for a very long time because I love their size is great. And like my parents have had some of their stuff for a very long time, and it's very strong. And so I think a few mugs would at least survive my children still. So
yeah. Dishwasher, microwave, oven safe, not necessarily kid safe.
Right. That's the one you can't plan for.
Yeah.
That's great. So another question I had, because within business, there's obviously a lot of moving pieces and aspects to it. And so how have you and Natalie kind of maneuvered through business, working together on a day-by-day basis? How have you guys kind of made that work, and what are the things that you guys have found that helps in that?
Well, we've definitely there are tasks that we do together and then tasks that we do individually. And I think that's a kind of a key to it. Like we do the fun stuff together, like the decorating of the pottery and the unloading of the kiln. We do that together. That's kind of the big, the fun payoff when you're unloading that kiln. The more mundane things, like Natalie does the taxes and I pound out the clay balls for making plates or whatever. And so I think having that mix where we kind of have our separate tasks kind of helps keep us from getting in each other's hair a little too much. I think it also helps that we're best friends. When before we worked together, we just kind of did everything together, so it wasn't like this big stretch. We even I decorate the black pottery and the blues, and she does the goldstone and the lavender, and we really have things kind of separated out, and that's developed over time. Where we have sort of our separate roles we do in the studio. And I think that helps. And, we don't always agree. So I think it's best to kind of have that philosophy when you're working together, that it's not personal, it's business. You're trying to, work stuff out. It's not like you're going to disagree from time to time, and you can't take it personally. It's just, you got to make decisions, and that can be tough. Not every decision is an easy one running a business. So, and then outside of work, also, we try to do the fun stuff together, and, we kind of split the chores up so we're not doing everything together all the time. And we have a lot of similar hobbies and different hobbies, so we're, not always doing everything together. I think that's the struggle for, a lot of the couples we know that do arts together. It's like, you just have to kind of divide out the tasks to make sure that you're not, bugging each other over the details and everything. And most of the potters I know do work as couples.
Okay.
At least a lot of them do that are, serious professionals, not the hobby artist style. And that seems to be a common division, that one of them does more of the business managing, the other is a little more production oriented. And so that's pretty classic, I feel like, for pottery couples.
Okay. Nice. So how do you guys have any sort of process or anything that you guys kind of use when you're making a decision if you guys aren't able to come to an agreement?
Not really.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't, fortunately, we can just we're usually pretty good at just kind of talking things through and finally just kind of coming to an agreement on something. I wouldn't say there's really much of a formal process because, we do a lot of tasks together. And so we just kind of chat about something. And, over the years, we've gotten to know a little more what each other's, limits or buttons are. I mean, you try to avoid pushing those and also knowing how much does something even really matter that much? Is it worth, arguing over? And so I think we just kind of both learned to kind of relax a little bit more on needing to have something your way or not. And you just gotta, it's just a business decision. It's not, not personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
very cool. So now kind of looking ahead then, we're coming to the end of 2021. What are you guys kind of looking ahead for 2022?
Well, hopefully more of the shows will happen again this next year. We're kind of hoping to stick with that formula that has worked in the past of, keeping our few good wholesale accounts going, so we get that kind of that monthly check, and then hit the big shows in the spring and summer. Honestly, my big goal this next year is to be able to enjoy a little less work and a little less stress. It's been a stressful couple of years.
Yeah.
We're really hoping to get back to a more normal schedule, which for us has always been slightly subjective. You have to work a lot of weekends, so it's like our weekends are often kind of a mess. And so we're hoping to get back to Sunday, Monday weekends, and then hopefully be able to sneak in a couple sunny days off here and there in the new year. It's less time spent strategizing, I guess, is our big hope for 2022. There's been a lot of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic in 2020, and then this year too, just trying to figure out how to make it all work. So the year started off, things were still pretty hairy, and didn't know what was going to happen, and it worked out better than we thought it would. So we're just hoping that this next year we can not spend so much time strategizing and stressing, and just be able to focus a little bit more on the production end of things, because we got behind because we're just scrambling to try to figure out how to make it work.
Yep.
So we're hoping to be able to get a little bit ahead in the new year, so that in the summertime when we actually have business, we're not like, oh my gosh, how do we make and sell all this pottery that we don't have yet?
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
Well, we went to our favorite used bookstore and loaded up on a bunch of used books. I love reading in the evenings, especially in the wintertime. And so I got this giant stack of books, for relatively inexpensively. So I would say that's my favorite purchase. I've been really enjoying, found some great new books. So
nice. What style of books are you normally reading?
My favorite is historical fictions are my favorite. I love big epic sagas of, fictional characters participating in historical events. I do read a lot of biographies, and I also like adventure books about, mountain climbers or, sea exploration and stuff like that. So
yeah, very cool. Is there a favorite book series that you enjoy in that vein?
I would say I've really enjoyed a lot of the Mishner novels, and Edward Rutherford writes some really great, epic historical fictions that are really well done.
Okay.
Those would be probably a couple of my favorite authors.
Nice. Very cool. All right. Pretend you have a friend coming from out of town. What would their first day look like?
Well, we probably actually had my brother-in-law that I hadn't seen for many years come this summer, and we threw some burgers on the grill and took him for a little hike, our favorite little river hike nearby, and some other. And if it's nice weather, I would like to try to get somebody outside, to see the mountains or go or something, enjoy what we love best about the Northwest, some of the natural environment.
Very
and
cool.
Usually some good cooking.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's another benefit of being in this area. There's so much that's made or grown or, pastured locally. So you can just get everything right here. It's very cool. All right. Who's an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
So I had two ideas. One is another artist I think is absolutely fascinating is Stefan Murray. He's the Sauk Mountain Potter. He's probably close to 80, if not over 80, and he was one of the original inspirations for me getting into art and pottery. He's a fascinating guy. His wife Nicole she helps sell, but she's also an author. They're a really neat couple, and they're up near Concrete. And I just find them really interesting. And then a non-artist I find it would make a great interview would be Andrew Miller. He's an old classmate. He's the kind of one of the main guys behind the Spinach Bus Ventures. They bought the Tulip Town, and he's a real big mover and shaker local Skagit Valley movement. He's a fascinating guy. I highly recommend him as a good interview.
Very cool. Yeah. No, we got to go visit them. I think it was in 2020 because they took it over, and then we had 2020.
Yeah. And they've pulled through, and I think a lot of it has to do with his never say die spirit and charisma and having a core group of people dedicated to making it happen. So he's a great person to talk to about perseverance and succeeding in the face of what seems like an impossible situation.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I would love to do that. All right, and lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self? To stay positive. I think that there are times when every artist, things can get rough, and you gotta keep a positive mindset, and you just gotta stay positive and push through. Eventually, things will work out. Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Jeff McDougall for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. And have a Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you guys next year.